Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Pro Wrestling's Inside and Outs regular weekly look at Continental Championship Wrestling. Promotion based in Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, East Tennessee, East Mississippi, all points in between. Had a good time back in the 80s watching this promotion growing up. And the gentlemen you see on your screen, every single one of them but me, actually had involvement in Continental Championship Wrestling.
Well, I can say it's fired up.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you can tell. Quoting Tommy Wildfire Rich there, you got the West boys, Brent and Rodney. They are, of course, the sons of legendary Ronnie West, longtime NWA official, who wore many, many, many hats over the years. And his latest hat that he wears is a member of the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, and we're quite proud of that. Also see there on your screen, legendary, and I don't throw that around, all kidding aside, legendary figure. Yeah, you can quit looking around. Jack Lord, you know who you are. We're glad to have Jack.
I was giving crowd.
I got Lou Fez up here.
Okay, well, there's another legendary figure. But we are glad to have Jack back, and we're glad to have all of you tuning in. If you've been keeping up with it, you know that we have been going through 1985. Very, very briefly here. Southeastern Championship Wrestling, the ownership made a switch in the early spring, almost summer of 85, changed the name of the promotion to Continental Championship Wrestling, moved the primary taping site from Dothan and that area up to Boutwell Auditorium in Birmingham for the most part, named Gordon Soley.
Hey, where they had the monitors on each side of the...
Yeah, they had the monitors, the imaginary monitors. But named Gordon Soley is the host. And we're about 3 months now into it. What we're looking at today on this episode is actually the October 12th, 1985 episode. I lied to you. I had calculated it was September 28th last week that we would be looking at, but it's actually October 12th.
Well, the truth of the matter is, I could not find the September 28th episode anywhere.
And I don't have it. And I wish that we did, because that actually is the first appearance on TV of the Bullet gimmick.
Was you there, Mitch, when he came in?
I was not. I was there not long after that, but I was not in Boutwell. And
I bet the place went wild. I bet that place went wild.
It did, and I can remember on TV the way they played it. And, of course, Ron and Robert and Jimmy, that being Ron Fuller, Robert Fuller, and Jimmy Golden, went through their stages of grief and depression, all of it at one time on TV. But you know what? Those guys were great heels. On this episode, actually, we get the start of it, and it's available on YouTube, by the way, Continental Championship Wrestling, October 12th. And we start off with Gordon Soley introducing the show as usual, but you'll notice in the backdrop that he has got, actually, it was short-lived. Continental created a Continental TV title. They had a trophy, and they had a tournament, and the tournament actually starts on this episode. Gordon introduces that. And we get the first of a few times, once or twice a year, where the promotion actually invited fans to write in and suggest dream matches, where they would basically say, okay, we'd like to see Brad Armstrong against Jimmy Golden in a cage match, and the promotion would decide whether or not the match would hit the air. And a lot of times, they really were dream matches. While they open the program, the very first match we get is a very young Brickhouse Brown, if you know that name, if you ever watch Memphis wrestling, a few other areas. Brick spent a lot of time in Memphis. He didn't spend quite as much time in Continental. He had a couple different runs. This one, he's actually a babyface against a very new, very heel, exotic Adrian Street. We've talked about Adrian at length on this show, but one person we've not talked about all that much, just a little bit, is Brickhouse Brown. And I would like to get you guys now, Brent and Rodney, I don't know that you actually got to work with Brick in Continental, did you, until maybe 89?
I don't think we were there in 89 when he was there. No. We were in Mid-South Wrestling when he was there. And I'm going to tell you what, Brickhouse Brown was over in Continental. I mean, why did he end up leaving? I wonder. Where did he go? Did he go back to Mid-South Wrestling?
Jack, you know?
I really don't. I talked to Brick several times and asked him that question, but I just never did really get a real good answer about that.
Well, maybe he got that great payoff or something.
I know that they teamed him. Of course, I guess I should have given this background too. Brent and Rodney and their dad actually hit Continental or come back to Alabama January the 4th, 1986. So we're a couple months away from the guys actually being involved again in Continental. And Brickhouse Brown, I'm thinking his run may have already been over when the West boys got there. If not, it was pretty close. They actually teamed him later on after this, or actually right around this time, with Norvell Austin. They called them briefly the Soul Patrol. If you watch this episode, Brickhouse comes out. If you didn't live in the 80s or you don't know what I'm talking about, a boom box is basically just a gigantic stereo. And Brick comes out. I really can't tell what's playing, but you can hear it. They've got it. I imagine they had it pumped over the house, and he just was acting like he was listening, but he's carrying the big boom box on his shoulder. Of course, any match with Adrian Street is going to be entertaining, but Brickhouse Brown brought enough athleticism to the house that he really, I would have liked to have seen more of this.
Okay, I have to ask the question. Did someone take his boombox and hit him with it?
Not on this episode, but you know what? I do remember that happening, and I think it was the Nightmares. I'm almost positive it was the Nightmares in Columbus, Mississippi.
Whenever you get hit by your own gimmick, bad time, bad thing.
Well, as we all know, if there's ever a cake, somebody's going into the cake. We know that for sure. We can all ask Jim Cornette.
Well, when we all can get together, we're going to do that with Rodney, and we're going to put Rodney's face in a cake. And it's going
to. Well, we had a few on Continental. We had one with Jerry Stubbs and the Dirty White Boy brought a cake out for their year anniversary, and of course they end up wearing the cake courtesy of Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden. But later on down the way, we get something that they do on Continental quite often. They call it the Stars of the NWA, and it's basically a feature. Sometimes it's a musical feature like The Bullet and Bad to the Bone by George Thorogood. Sometimes it was just an interview. Sometimes it was like they'd be on location somewhere. In this particular case, I'm not sure whose house they were at, but we get Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden in a jacuzzi drinking champagne. It's quite the sight. Robert Fuller, as we talked about last week, still settling into his heel role after years as a babyface in Alabama. And he keeps talking about that punk over and over and over again. And if you pay attention, he's actually referring to Brad Armstrong, but I don't think he actually ever calls Brad by name.
Let me ask you a question. Rodney, I'm going to ask you this question. Wasn't somebody holding the mic?
I actually fast forward through that. I don't know.
I don't know. I know that but the camera is. Yeah. Who would that be? Do we know? The camera is right down close to them. I know at one point Robert decides he's going to say that he's going to slap the taste out of his mouth or something, and he's talking about Brad being cross-eyed, and he never says Brad, but he slaps water and it goes.
I bet that was Ron Fuller's house. I bet Sherry Martell. I don't think it was Sherry Martell. Sherry Welch, his wife. I bet she was the one holding the mic.
Was probably holding it. It was good.
Possible. And they probably took all afternoon to film that one little 2 minutes.
They probably did it on purpose.
And they kept drinking. We need Ronald. We need some more champagne over here. We're out.
Well, we just can't get this interview right.
We're just about passed out in the jacuzzi here.
Let me ask this, because I think this is one that any Continental fan can identify with, and all three of you. Now, two of you were never in the ring with them, but I have to ask this: what was it like working daily around Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden? And I'll just leave that open to any of the three of you that want to answer. Anytime.
I love Jimmy Golden. Jimmy Golden is one of the absolute nicest guys you will ever meet. And I like Robert too.
Did you ever wrestle them, Jack?
No, we were always heels. So
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, Robert was a great guy. Robert
he was
in the dressing room was spectacular. You would laugh. If you were around him at any point in time, you would laugh. Jimmy Golden was always very quiet. But
I don't know that I ever saw Robert get upset about anything. He was just always in a good mood around me.
He always wanted his bonus while we were always there.
One thing that I always remember hearing guys that work with him say is how creative he was. Would you agree with that?
Somewhat, and sometimes.
Or did he have help?
I think Jimmy Golden was his assistant most of the time.
Right.
This is what I always thought of Robert. Robert was good for, 3 months. The first 3 months going to be great business.
Yep.
But then that fourth month was going to go down a little bit. That fifth month was going to go down. By that time, the 6th month go down because he would keep his guys for so long periods of times that he would do great. He'd have great ideals and stuff, and then he'd keep his same talent, and it would go. And then that's when Ron Fuller would take it back over. If you'll notice, about 6 months, Robert Fuller would do the book, and Ron Fuller would come back and him and Bob Armstrong would book it, and it would go back up. And then Robert would get it for 6 months, and Robert for the first 3 months is going to draw a lot of money.
Well, here's another question. Now, the next segment on the show, we get, and I want to spend just a little bit of time on this. We get Adrian Street and Miss Linda and the Flame are in the ring with Mike Jackson, and Continental did this quite often. They'd have 2 rivals in the ring and maybe 2 with Gordon Soley. And Norvell Austin is standing at the podium with Mr. Soley, and so is Roberto Soto. This is really kind of where they start more moving the needle. The Flame has beaten Tommy Rich to win the Continental title back. Roberto Soto has actually got the Alabama title, and I mean the old big one. And Adrian Street and Norvell Austin are feuding over the Southeastern title. Now, one thing we don't get, and I know we did on over into December, and then he leaves. I would have loved for Jody Hamilton to stay around, but I know that it's about this time when he either helps create or takes a more hands-on role in Deep South Wrestling in Georgia. We unfortunately, and I say this from Continental fans' point of view, we never did get Jody back to Continental. He did a little run briefly I found out later it was actually Roger Smith as El Fuego, and it was just Jody doing some interviews and sending them in. How well do y'all know each of the 3 of y'all? And I'll just let you go around the horn. Maybe start with Rodney. How well did y'all get to know Jody at all, or was it maybe more in Georgia Championship Wrestling than y'all knew him?
Jody really wasn't available for us to talk to. He pretty much came in, did his thing, and then moved on. And that's in Georgia as well. Now Georgia was different. He was, I think, he was assistant booker at the time, so he didn't have time to mess with nobody. So that's about as far as watching him and in the ring. That's about as far as we got with Jody.
Brent.
Yeah, it's the same here. That now when we were going to do something with him right before he got took out for whatever reason, the Deep South Wrestling WWE thing that he had going on. I don't know what happened there, but we talked to him a lot then. Very nice guy. But during those times during Georgia, and we never talked to him. So.
And Jack, I know you were really familiar with him over the years as the Assassin. And of course, later on is the Flame. What were your impressions of Jody when he was active?
Well, same thing. I mean, he was just always a very nice guy, but he was always involved in the office part, so you didn't get to spend a lot of time with him. I have actually got to talk with him more, at fan conventions and stuff over the last few years than I ever did when we were actually, on the same cards.
All I know is he threw the best fireball I ever seen in my life.
He did, and I think that's what most Continental fans remember him as. But that guy was one of the best heel interview guys I remember in the history of the business. We're talking Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Jody Hamilton. I mean, to me, he's up there in that group.
I agree with that.
Very
Very
first class,
distinctive voice for sure.
and made you believe that this guy really means every freaking word he says, every single week. Now, I mean, without fail. Moving on real quick, the next segment, and we'll get to the stud bounty hunters in just a minute before we have to go. But we get Brad Armstrong and the Bullet at the podium with Gordon Soley, and we pull out Bob Geigel. Gordon Soley mentions at the start of the show that he's got a message for someone on the Continental roster, and he brings, of course, the Bullet out. Brad Armstrong comes with him, and he tells the Bullet, the message from Mr. Geigel is that if the Bullet wrestles in Continental Wrestling and if the mask is taken off with proof that it's Bob Armstrong, that the Bullet will be permanently banned from competing in Continental Wrestling. And, of course, the Bullet's response is, well, if is an awfully big word. And he proceeds to walk off the set and let Brad do the interview. We talked about this before, and I forget which one of you guys told me, but the Bullet, as I kind of predicted back when I was a kid, the Bullet was never meant to be a full-time gig for Bob Armstrong. It was supposed to be only temporary, right? Can any of the three of y'all elaborate on that just a little bit more?
No, absolutely. In fact, you will see when it comes to the end of the 90 days, Ron Fuller comes out there and does an interview saying that he's got with his lawyers, and the Bullet will Bob Armstrong will never be back. And because the Bullet got over so well, it was supposed to end in 90 days, but he comes out and extends it in that interview. And I think I think it's coming up very shortly. And like I said, it was I don't think they expected it to be that big. They thought that when he took the mask off and come back as Bob Armstrong would be bigger, but the Bullet got over better.
Yeah, it was, and when he comes out during this match, man, was he over.
I always said he was our Hulk Hogan.
Yeah,
serious business. The Bob was the Continental area's answer to Hulk Hogan. And by the way, if you're out there and maybe you didn't live through this time and you're younger, WWF at the time did come to Birmingham. They did come to Birmingham Jefferson Civic Center. Yours truly was there in attendance a few times.
Shame on you.
I know. And they did come to Huntsville. They did come to Atlanta. And, of course, Continental didn't run Atlanta. But Continental TV was outdrawing WWF's syndicated show, Superstars of Wrestling, during this time. Now, that would, of course, look toward the end of the 80s. That would change. When Vince McMahon kind of, got a stranglehold on the industry. You can look at that as good or bad. That was business moves. And anyway, though, it did make for an entertaining second half of the 80s of the decade. Real quick, I know we're running out of time. I've got to say, what are your thoughts? We get the first commercial for the Tommy Rich life-size poster.
Hey, I love the beginning of that thing, though, where he was standing
in the way, and then he walks. Yeah. Classic.
I don't even remember that commercial. I know I used to see them posters being sold, but I don't. That was tremendous. Well, who was this group that was selling this thing?
It was out of Indiana or Illinois was the address.
I never heard of those people, so I don't.
So young Brent and young Rodney didn't have to peddle the Tommy Rich poster at the.
Nope. I think they had them because I think isn't that the poster that the Nightmares had a cone hair?
Yeah, when he started doing independent stuff later on, he used to have a trunk full of them things because he would bring them to every show.
I do remember they had it put up everywhere, and I don't mean just at Tommy's table. They had that up all over the merchandise area at the time. And yes, that is the one that Danny Davis and Ken Wayne took and made the cone head out of.
All I can say is fire 'em up.
Yeah, that might have been where the Tommy Rich poster jumped the shark. I'm not really sure that was the best idea because I think a lot of people thought it was funny. I know I did, even though I love you, Tommy. At any rate, the closing episode, part of the episode here, Speaking of Tommy Rich, we get Tommy and Johnny Rich. It's actually supposed to be, I think, a singles match between Johnny and one of the Nightmares, and it turns into just a flat-out brawl, which if you've watched this show for any length of time, you've heard Jack, you've heard Rodney and Brent especially, you've heard me talk about the just flat-out wrestling wars that the Nightmares and Tommy and Johnny Rich had all over the Continental area. And I'm talking about, not fire it up, that too, but talk about spilling some blood, talk about leaving some hair on ring mats, talk about lose or leave, whatever you want to talk about, hair color. And I'm completely convinced they did that because Danny and Kenny wanted to color their hair. And turn it into a gimmick. But what overall, if you could say one or two words to describe any time the Riches and the Nightmares got in the ring, Brent, we'll start with you.
Fantastic.
What would be your word?
Fantastic.
Okay.
That was just fantastic.
And Jack, was this before your time into Continental, or you remember that?
Oh, I remember that. They were just great matches, man. I mean, they didn't get better than that.
And Rodney, I know you were partial in a lot of ways, if I remember, to Jerry Stubbs and the Dirty White Boy and the Nightmares, and you were ringside for a lot of that. Yeah, what did you think about
these were just awesome. This was awesome. I'll just tell you right now, the Nightmares later on when Robert and Jimmy take the place, they can't follow it. They just simply can't follow it, and they're great, but not after the Nightmares and Tommy and Johnny. That
was a hard act to follow.
It was really hard.
Yeah, and later on, we were privileged enough. One thing I remember more than anything else of Continental, and I think maybe some people think I put too much emphasis on it, but I had so much fun with it, was when Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden turned heel on the Nightmares. They beat up the IROC Camaro a little bit. Of course, they break Kenny Wayne's ribs, and we get the immortal line from Buddy Wayne. They didn't just make one ball bat, they made a bunch of them, which is one of my favorite lines from Continental ever. But yeah, boy, Nightmares and Tommy and Johnny Rich was a tough act to follow. Well, come back on our next episode. We'll talk more about 1985. What do you guys think of the way the Bullet and Brad Armstrong fought I guess I should say, what do you know about the Studs Bounty Hunters before we go off the air? We talked about that a little bit before.
I know the guy personally that trained those guys.
Was it you?
Me.
Okay. Wow. Hey, can you tell us, Jack, a little bit more about them? They were brothers, if I remember right.
Twin brothers. One was 380 and one was 400.
Wow.
Because the 400-pound one splashed me off the top rope one night. I thought I was going to die. Brad was one. I can't remember the name of the other. One has passed away that I know of. They both wound up moving back to Texas. They didn't stay involved in wrestling, but maybe just a few years.
That was my next question.
Yeah, they didn't really stick it out. That was when Louis Tilley was trying to get in, and Louis brought the guys up, and I worked with them, and and then Louis kind of stood over in the corner and he'd correct stuff every now and then. And then when they got done, Louis would get in the ring with me. So it was a great time. Good guys. Cool. Good guys.
Oh, them guys was spectacular. First time we ever saw them, they went against Austin Idol and Pork Chop Cash. And, man, they had a great match. The people went nuts. I mean, I believe that may have been the day that was that the day that the things broke on us? Was that the same day?
I
think we both took a bump off of those.
That's right.
And that was close enough that probably the whole live crowd at Boutwell remembered them from that Austin Idol Pork Chop Cash match. I will say this, both of them kind of look like a young Ray Traylor.
Yeah. I think somebody missed the boat with them.
They did.
I did too.
This was a blunder on Ron Fuller's part. Absolute blunder. He should have really kept these guys, but there's no room. If you look at this, if you looked at the crew at that time, there's no room for them. But this could have been a special attraction he could have brought in on a regular basis. This was just big. This missed opportunity. Totally missed opportunity.
Well, Jack, that is pretty cool. I will admit, guys, I did not know Jack. I didn't bring that up because I knew Jack trained those guys, but we were talking about it before we came on the air. And what an interesting little fact that Jack actually trained those guys. We glad to have everybody that tunes in every week. Hope you'll be back next week or whenever you're watching this. For Brent West, for Rodney West, for Jack Lord, I'm Mitch Lucas, and come back and watch our weekly look back at Continental Championship Wrestling again.
Come back and we'll fire them up. Fire them up. See y'all later.